to start off with the Q&A. So if you have questions, start thinking about them. I'll be calling on you in a minute. But I think one thing that's important to talk about when we talk about autonomous vehicles, we're not just talking cars and trucks. We're talking about anything that moves, people or products, goods. It can become autonomous. And John, maybe you want to talk a little bit. It can be a boat, it can be a plane, it can be a train.
I think that's right. I mean, where the most impetus for autonomy is right now is in the trucking industry. And I think we're likely to see whole-scale adoption of autonomy in the trucking industry long before we see it in private vehicles. But think massive steamships. They're going to be cruising the open seas with much reduced crew. Airplanes. It's a scary thought. Airplane not having a pilot up front, but maybe it's one instead of two. But yeah, we're going to see autonomy, and that's going to lead to price declines. It's going to lead to more efficiency of so many different aspects of our lives.
The other thing is that I'm seeing that there may be a leap to flying vehicles. We just saw in Dubai, I believe, that they have a drone that will carry a single passenger. I'd love to hear from the panel. Do you think that we're going to move maybe right to autonomous flying vehicles?
I'll chime in and say that's the nightmare scenario. I don't want vehicles flying over myself, and I imagine that most people don't want vehicles just flying all over in the air too. So I don't think that we're headed that way. Maybe in 100 years, but we're going to be on the ground for a long time first. Lauren, I think, has a different view.
Oh, no, I actually agree. And I was just going to say from the regulating perspective, they're facing a lot of very similar issues. I mean, it's another disruptive technology. And it's really, I mean, can you imagine? They don't even have the limitations of roadways in the sky. So how do you limit that? How high can people go? How do you make sure there aren't crashes? Who's controlling all of that? I mean, it's really complicated. So let Dubai do it, though.
The Jetsons, come on, I want the Jetsons.
And let me add greenhouse gas to that equation. I mean, flying will take a whole lot more energy than driving. And so with a lot of flying vehicles, there goes our greenhouse gas reduction, and that's extremely urgent.
Thank you.
If I can just add, I mean, it is a dangerous prospect because it's not actually a really difficult thing. Think about the drones that little kids are flying around, right? I was watching a science show with my son, and they're developing a drone where it's just big, and you put a chair in the middle of it, and you have a flying vehicle.
Yeah, we saw that with balloons too, I think. Wendy. Wait, we have a microphone if you'd wait till the microphone gets to you. Thank you.
Yeah, this is all very exciting, but I think as the PowerPoint was not working, many of us had the same thought, which is computer technology has a bad habit of crashing and not working properly and such like that. I mean, we talk about hacking, but it's just the basic day-to-day, it's not working. How is that being addressed?
Do you want to go, Lauren?
I'm sure we all have opinions, but so I've seen and been on many panels where the automakers or technology developers are asked that question because that's a very understandable issue. And really the technology answer is we're going to have tons of redundancy in this technology. So if one thing fails, there are going to be one system or two systems or three systems of backup. I'm not a technologist, so I can't go into any more of the detail than that. The next question is, how much safer do driverless vehicles need to be in order to mean that they're okay to put them on the road? So if you know that you're going to have a 10% reduction in the accidents that happen, but there are still going to be accidents and they're going to be caused by robots instead of humans, is that okay for our society? And the studies, as they're showing right now, are saying that people have a really hard time accepting accidents caused by robots, even if it's safer. So I think there's going to be a really interesting transition in terms of education around all of that, and I don't know how it will evolve in that sense.
But don't we also know that so far Google's testing is millions of hours and very, very low accident rates. So, I mean, we do have some evidence that the safety and the ability to do this is sound science.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to respond, Ryan?
Yeah, to me, the point when they are ready is not when they are crash-free, but when they are killing fewer than 40,000 people a year.
Very good point.
One last point. I think about the I think really old joke now about if Microsoft built your car, right? You'd have to be prepared to stop on the road periodically to reboot it and all that, right? We all know that joke, right? And the point of my bringing it up is that the tolerance for things going wrong in an autonomous vehicle is going to be so much lower than it is in the computer that's on your desktop. You can't just wait for it to reboot and go get a cup of coffee, right? You just want it to work. So the market will demand that it works and that it works well.
Gentleman over there. Wait for the microphone, please.
Should we be diverting the money that's being spent or advocated for high-speed rail between San Francisco and LA and diverting it, or maybe half of it, to getting effective rapid bus transport?
I mean, I have a feeling we all have strong opinions on this. As the company that's doing program management for the development of high-speed rail, this is a loaded answer, but in general, I actually think that is that much more important for us to invest in fixed route transit, to invest in having really rich, reliable, especially when it comes to these long hauls. Because let's just imagine, and I don't know off the top of my head what the forecasts are, but imagine if you just get rid of all of the rail transit in the Bay Area, or even all transit in general. Think about the mass congestion that would happen. I think it is so important that driverless vehicles are introduced in a way to support the shared vehicle usage that we have. So think first, last mile. How do you get people to the BART system, to the Caltrain system? And same with the high-speed rail system. I think it's going to be a great connector north and south in California, and driverless vehicles will provide a great way to get to that system so that we do have less people on the roads.
Did you want to add something, John?
Yeah. So yes. I agree sort of 75% with Lauren. My issue with high-speed rail is that it's very fixed route. And changing that route, as inevitably people will want to do, is going to be enormously expensive. If instead we have roadways where we have first-class seating on buses that are going 200 miles an hour, which sounds really scary, but I don't think that it will be when it comes about. Rerouting those to where population centers are and to where people want to go is going to be, relative to rerouting high-speed rail, it's a picnic. It's not going to cost nothing, but it will be feasible, whereas rerouting high-speed rail not.
Yeah, as someone who's enjoyed using high-speed rail in Europe and South Korea and Taiwan and China and Japan, I have never been a big fan of it in California. I mean, for a variety of reasons. It's in Japan, it works very well. You've got the Shinkansen that has, Japan's slightly smaller than California, but it's got 125 million people, and most everybody lives on a pretty small band of land between Tokyo and Fukuoka. And when you get to Osaka or Kobe or Hiroshima, you've got a fabulous transit system waiting for you to take you wherever you need to get. With this technology, it is virtual technology. We don't need to spend the money in the infrastructure. And so for me, I would raise that very same question that you did.
Lady in the back.
Hi, I'm really happy to hear you talk about things like microtransit. I think that's an area that I'm hoping that TAM will very much embrace, and that's an area that I think that we here in Marin could potentially adopt and get to faster than the longer transition that one of the panelists describes there. But I think we can kind of see what the vision of what it looks like when we have full adoption, but I think that transition is going to be what's the most difficult part, and I'd love to hear what the panelists think that we can do here in Marin with the kind of community that we have and the kind of small cities that we have. What are things that we in local government can do during that transition time to try to ease that path?
So That question is near and dear to my heart because I think it's asked not often enough, but I think there's a range. This is kind of where I was going in my talk. I think just building awareness, that kind of thing, really incorporating it into your transportation plans, understanding what could happen in the future. But getting into today, I mean, starting to engage with these stakeholders, starting to talk to, I mean, you have in your backyard all of these technology developers, almost all of the car companies now have offices in the Bay Area. They're doing testing. Bring the testing to Marin. It's great that Lyft is going to do a first last mile partnership. Let one of those driverless shuttles do a first last mile partnership. It's smart. But start to think about, because the partnership agreements, and I can say this from my experience working with MTC as they've been partnering with carpool app companies, it is really complicated to transition a government agency into partnering with the private sector in a way that kind of finds the mutual benefits, but also minimizes the negative benefits. And how do you have the arrangements around data sharing, and what is it that you want to get out of that partnership? So starting to do those partnerships now, which is why working with Lyft is a great first step, is important because you're going to want to do that more and more as the technology evolves, and they are going to just show up. I mean, literally, you could just see a Google car probably driving through here, or any of those companies, at any time. I mean, there's nothing limiting them. They have the approval to test in California. So starting to talk to them about it and starting to think about what are the problems we're trying to solve in Marin, and how can they help solve them? I think that's an important question to ask them.
Do we have a question over there? Yes.
Hi, two questions. Thank you for the information. First, I haven't heard anything about the investment cost on the new vehicles that are going to be required, what the size of that investment would be. And then secondly, kind of piggybacking off of that, I'm not really clear how, if that service is essentially provided by one provider or several providers, does that essentially become a public utility service, and doesn't that require some consideration of either federal or state oversight and control? Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Ryan?
What I'm hearing is that the equipment adds about $5,000 to $10,000 to the cost of a car, but that will come down. So it's not terribly expensive from what I'm hearing. I'd be interested to hear if they know of anything else. And so that's going to be there present. And the part about the sort of the Uber and Lyft and the requirements and all that, I think it's this an area we've got to decide what we're going to do on. There was a paper by a guy by the name of Bruce Schaller, who was on the New York Transportation Commission, about regulations and who ought to regulate this. Should it be the state or local governments? And his idea was that as long as you've already decided who you're going to go with, in other words, you call Uber or Lyft, that should be a state regulation. But the locals should get involved when you've got people just calling, hailing a vehicle on the street, that maybe becomes more of a local regulatory issue. But on the state level, I think we ought to make sure that we're permitting as much as possible the 3-person, the 4-person, the 6-person, and sort of the multi-shared vehicles, so that they can operate. In partial answer to your question before.
All right, we're running out of time, so a quick answer, because I want to take one more question. It's going to be Mike Gelati over here, if the mic could go over here.
Okay, I'll be brief. Yeah, I think the cost estimates are about $5,000 to $10,000, and even if the cost is going to come down dramatically, but even if it doesn't matter, right? Lyft and Uber. I think it was either the head of Lyft or Uber has said to Elon Musk, if you can produce 50,000 autonomous vehicles, I'll buy them from you tomorrow, right? Because the cost of labor for driving these cars relative to that $5,000 to $10,000 is enormous. So.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you, and thanks to Tam for putting this on. It's pretty cool to have this in our own backyard, and a high-quality panelist, so thanks for making the time. As a third-generation road builder, this is kind of depressing hearing that we're not going to increase highway capacity and road capacity and all that. I get it, but you know, I see where it's all going. It's actually really interesting. I'm thinking this morning, you know, my oldest couldn't wait till he was 16, buy a truck, go drive. My youngest now is freshman in high school, really doesn't care about getting his permit because he's already taking Uber around town with his friends. So we already see that transition. But the one thing I saw a little bit, but I didn't really hear, you know, for us, our industry already underfunded. Everybody's driving through potholes every day now with the weather. It's made it even worse. We're already underfunded. The gas tax and the value that comes, you know, the funding that comes from the gas tax to pay for all these roads, that goes away. Where does our funding come from, and how do we invest in our infrastructure in the future?
Thank you.
Excellent question.
It's on.
Okay, excellent question. I like a vehicle miles traveled fee that incorporates other considerations like how many greenhouse gases you're emitting along with it. But we're going to have to switch, especially because there's so much push for electric vehicles. We won't have as much infrastructure to build, but we will need to maintain the existing infrastructure. So that's where the funding ought to really go.
Well, and if you think about it, there are likely to be 3, 5 different organizations doing most of the transportation. Just tax them, right? I mean, we've been incredibly reluctant to tax Uber and Lyft, to regulate them. I think the first thing we need to come to terms with is we're going to need to regulate, and we're going to need to tax these guys right up front. And that's going to provide plenty of revenue. In the short term, right, the revenue, I hope, comes from the fact that we're not building any more capacity. Right, so take all the money that was going to capacity and put it to filling potholes. Right, so that might be more of your business. Over the longer term, you know, think about how to build garages now that can transition easily into a bedroom. There are going to be lots of opportunities in Marin for building housing. Think the parking lot around the Corte Madera Mall. Right, we're not going to need that. So what do you do with it? Well, green space would be terrific, but Marin has an enormous housing problem. Right, we can build housing, affordable housing there. Right, and the NIMBYs who don't want it because of the transportation issues. Well, the transportation issues are going to be gone. So we're going to be able to build more housing. Things are just going to get better. Different, but better.
Lauren, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, very minor point with the road user charge. I think the other thing that new technology introduces is the ability to tax not just based on the distance traveled, but also the occupancy, the number of people in the vehicle. So you could actually charge a lot less for people that are sharing rides versus single occupancy vehicle, and then charge a lot for zero occupancy vehicle trips, so that people really feel the impact not just of the distance, but how much value you're getting out of that trip.
And Bill Gates just said, for all the robots replacing workers, tax the robots. So we're seeing a model there. And I don't want to close this panel out without stressing the importance of looking at those displaced workers. When you're talking about millions of workers, 5 million plus workers, it is on us and on the communities and on the public policy, governmental agencies to make sure we are reskilling and upskilling those workers and finding new jobs for them and creating new jobs so that they have jobs to fill. So that, to me, is going to be one of the biggest public policy is on what happens to the people who are losing their jobs. Let's give a big hand to our panel. For those of you who didn't get to ask your questions, the panel will probably be here a few more minutes at the break, so please feel free, you can grab them then. Diane?
Thank you. You know, I just want to thank this panel and all of our panelists today who have voluntarily at no cost come here to share their thoughts and provide us some professional guidance, so thank you again. You know, we're going to take a short break, but I want to leave you with a question. I really would encourage you to engage each other, and especially our TAM board members and other local electeds who are here, with the question of should we and how should we develop this kind of technology in Marin? Should we have a automated vehicle to infrastructure corridor? Should we make that investment? Should that be a priority, and where? What benefit will they have? So keep asking those questions so that we know how and if we should invest, and as one of the speakers said, encourage and really create progress. We're very proud of the fact that Marin has been open-minded to progress. So how should this work here in Marin? We're going to take a short break, but I do want to recognize that we would not be here today without our sponsors. So I'm going to be thanking some of them every time I come to the microphone. I want to particularly thank Brian Kangas Falk and Bank of Marin, who are both our premier sponsors here today, Gelati Brothers, Inc., HNTB, Moffitt Nickel, Valley Cooper. These folks all do work on transportation here in Marin. They make my world better. They make your world better in terms of being available for our needs and giving us cost-effective professional guidance. I also want to encourage you to visit the booths that are outside. We have Sobe Bikes here. We have Marin Clean Energy, the Marin School of Environmental Leadership. Thank you very much for everyone that's involved in that, Zagster, and then BKF. So please visit our booths. We would like you to be back here in about 10 minutes. And thank you very much so far. I think we're getting some good input and some thought development here this morning. So thank you.